Today we are having a special event. Before the satsang, we will have a crystal singing bowls meditation, and Sandy is gonna do the performance. And she is a musician, so you're gonna have the opportunity to watch a nice performance. And then the satsang today will be about spontaneity. So if you stay after the singing bowls, we will discuss the subject of spontaneity as a shortcut to liberation, and you will see why. So would you like to share a little bit how was your experience with the singing bowls?
It's pretty intense at different times. For me, it was really interesting because, I was facing this way and the bowls were over there. I could hear like the waves from the bowls going in my left ear, then my right ear. It was like they were undulating between my left ear and my right ear, the sounds, which I thought was kind of unusual.
Stereo bowls.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. Yeah, you would think because the bowls were over there that the sounds would I would mainly, be hearing them with my left ear.
Right.
But it was like left, right, like they were undulating the sounds like waves. And then different bowls, I could feel the vibrations in different areas of my body.
Your body, right. All right.
Not sure what to say.
Oh my God, I'm only at a loss for words.
That in itself is profound. He had a transcendental experience.
He did.
Usually when I'm meditating, I'm looking for the gap between sounds and the gap between thoughts. But with the vibration from these bowls, it felt like the bowls were carrying my meditation along. It was different. Kind of helps the meditation along, rather than being a distraction from meditation. But because it was kind of a long meditation. But the general feeling was, instead of inner silence, there was fullness.
And Sandy, how was your experience as the performer?
Well, yeah, usually with playing the bowls, after I get into it a bit, it's like, it's not quite this clear, but it's almost like the bowls are talking to me, and I'm not really playing them. They're kind of telling me how to play them, but not specifically. It's more of a feeling. It's more of a
Intuitive
feeling like, oh, okay, play louder now, play softer, play this way, play that way, but it's not, it's completely different because, I'm a trained musician, and read music, which is totally different because music is like a language, and it's written on the page and you read it as such, and it's actually can be very mathematical. But this is like completely different. It's more like, I guess, improvising.
Spontaneous?
Yeah, more spontaneous, right. Yeah, right. More spontaneous. And
intuitive.
Intuitive,
word, right?
More intuitive, yeah, definitely.
So what happens when you go into a spontaneous and intuitive mode? What happens to your mind and to your feelings?
Well, they're just, it's kind of put on hold, yeah. Yeah.
The mind is put on hold.
Oh, the mind is put on hold.
And the body feels good.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's just like, it's like the bowl, when it's into that state, it's like I can't explain it, but there's no effort. The bowl's kind of just moves around. The mallet moves around the rim, kind of almost by itself, but
Right.
it
so
isn't.
in a way, you are in a state of meditation
Yeah.
during the playing.
Yeah.
During the performance.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
So spontaneity and meditation
Yeah.
go hand by hand, right?
Right.
Intuition and
Yeah.
the next move is not planned or
No.
thought
Yeah.
beforehand.
Right. Yeah.
And it feels good, right?
Yeah. It does. Yeah, and also then sometimes in playing one or two bowls, I hear the overtones, which is kind of cool. Then you can hear all the notes, or in between, or about some other tones. Like I said, the overtones, of the certain pitch.
So we have discussed this before, and that's why I kind of have understanding of it, and it's like your vocation is music, right? It's like
It was
very
yeah.
natural to you, and as a result, it's easy for you to when you're playing music to enter into a meditative state. So that's what happens with vocation. Regardless of the vocation we have, when we are into our vocation, we are functioning from a meditative state. And it's different for everyone, but it's our path to liberation too. Because we have an easy access there, easy access into the no mind. So you have an easy access there. So if you can do music 8 hours a day, right, because you have transformed music into your way of living, that's it. You are even if you can do it 2 or 3 times hours a day, right? You would spend 2 or 3 hours a day in meditation, no less, right?
Yeah, although the bowls, I must say, playing the bowls is complete, and that's what I think I started to say earlier. The bowls are completely different from playing a musical instrument.
Right.
The bowls are definitely, well, just the sound. I mean, the sound is very, very powerful.
Right.
Because I once had a mutual friend of Diane and myself. She's very psychic and intuitive, and I was playing them at my parents' house in Pennsylvania, and it's out of the city, it's out in the country. And she once walked, I started to play it, like on the porch, it was summer, and she started to walk, and she could even, to the point where she couldn't hear it, but she could still feel the effects. So the effects carry of the bowls, they're like, and they're clearing, that's what they're for. If you read anything, it can be very clear an area or
Right.
clear a person.
Right.
So it's less, for me, it's much less thinking and it's easier to be in kind of a meditative state with the bowls than with playing regular
Right.
music.
Very interesting to see how the performer feels in the act of performing something that is natural and second nature to them, especially when that performing is spontaneous. It's completely spontaneous, because this is really a completely spontaneous performance. There is nothing written, right?
Right.
It cannot be more spontaneous.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
right? So, and spontaneity is really about action, right? Mostly about action. Not saying exclusively, because we can have spontaneous thoughts, but when it comes to spontaneity, if we want to experience it more and more in our life, what we are attempting is to attain spontaneous action. And because spontaneous action is intuitive and it comes from spirit, right? It's the mind is bypassed, the programs of the ego are bypassed. So the action flows naturally and spontaneously, and the mind is quiet.
Right. Yeah, and I specifically, I was more and more as I work on myself, and it's specifically asked to get out of the way,
To get out of the way.
Yeah, just I'm not playing it, consciousness or awareness or whatever is playing the bowls,
Right. See, the process is the same for every true profession of the soul, so to speak. The healer, when he's doing energy healer, is asking the same: get me out of the way, right? So I can feel with my hands the energy of the patient and I can help. The teacher is doing the same, is keep me out of the way so that the words will flow through the mind-body organism without the mind obstructing. And the counselor will intuitively feel with a quiet mind, by hearing, right, things that are unseen by others and reflect them. So spontaneity is it's part of every vocation, actually.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of, especially you think of like mathematics and physics as being totally mental, and yet the people who discovered the most incredible things, like Einstein, from what I've read, he was out of his way when
Yes, it is.
insights came, and like any other discovery or
Right.
invention, which normally you think of as being very mental. And
In fact, without even going that far as an Einstein, I remember when we were studying engineering, and I was we were given every week tests, and they were scoring the tests, and we had to pass the course, right? So it was very important to get good grades. But one thing I discovered was that in order to solve a mathematical problem, which is handed to you, and you know the theory, but you don't know how to solve that particular problem, right?
Right.
So in order to solve the problem and to come to the solution, which usually they are tricky, in engineering they try to get you.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you had to quiet the mind. You had to stop thinking for a moment. It could be an instant. But as you're looking at the problem, and in a gap of thought, between thoughts, the answer comes on how to solve that particular problem. So mathematicians actually, they when they are trying to solve a difficult problem, they access intuition. They cannot do it entirely on logic.
Right.
Logic comes later to double check that the intuition was correct.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So we have actions that are controlled by programs, right? And they are kind of pre-planned. And this is kind of the opposite of spontaneous action. But even planning, when you're planning something, let's say you want to plan the actions for the next day, right? And then you think about the next day, and you know that certain things need to be done, but you don't know exactly what order they will be approached, and how to organize your day. At that moment, you can ask the question, how to go about these actions tomorrow, these activities tomorrow. And then you make silence and you wait for the answer to come into the mind. So at that moment you get a planning that comes from intuition also. So planning can be also intuitive, can also come from a higher level. Other thing that helps to attain spontaneous action is to rest as open awareness, for example, right? To remind yourself that there is no one here. Yeah. To use the pointer, there is no one here. To use any pointer that leads into a higher state of consciousness, so to speak, right? That puts you in contact with consciousness. Then as the mind quiets down and consciousness becomes evident to itself, by the way, not to you, the action that springs from the mind-body organism becomes spontaneous. So you were doing it. See, you were going to a meditative state, and then the action was playing, was coming through spontaneously, right? So by resting as open awareness, which is a form of meditation that you can do anytime during the day, or any other form of meditation that using any pointer that you like, you can access spontaneous activity, right? So another trick is in the morning, when you look at your activities during the day, you create the intention to function throughout the day from spontaneity. Intention is powerful. The whole universe was made on intention, right? So if you start the day with intention, today I will function from spontaneity, every action will be spontaneous, then that will permeate the rest of the day. And you finish an activity, and the next one is revealed spontaneously to you, instead of using so much the mind. Another trick is to ask, what needs to be done now? In Bhakti Yoga, they will say, oh God, tell me what to do now, right? Guide me. But in Advaita, it's actually very similar, but it's impersonal. So you just ask what needs to be done now, and you wait in silence. And the next thought will be intuitive and will guide you into what needs to be done now. So the activities of the day can follow one after another a spontaneous agenda. It takes away a lot of tension, because it can be a lot of tension associated with the ego trying to control your activities during the day. What happens is that you decide to do something with the ego, and the ego, because of its dualistic nature and its tendency to doubt, then will lead you into an activity, but while you are doing it, it will be thinking about another activity that needs to be done too, and it will not be focused. It will be worried about something else that needs to be done later, or questioning if it was a good decision to do that first. So the intuitive action, the action that springs from intuition, spontaneous, in a spontaneous way, doesn't have that problem. There is a certainty that this is what needs to be done now. There is no doubt and no inner contradictions where the mind is doing something but is thinking, oh, and I have to do this and this and that, right? And it's worried about the other things that need to be done. In the spontaneous action, when the action springs from intuition, there is no worrying. There is no doubt that this is the action that needs to be performed now. It's the dualistic nature of the mind and the ego that creates those type of inner contradictions. Not being complete at ease with the action that needs to be done in the moment. Thinking about what needs to be done next. Or what I should be doing instead of doing this. Maybe I didn't choose correctly. The thought that enters when you ask a question and you make silence in the mind, the first thought that enters is a spontaneous thought, and it leads to a spontaneous action. So you use that trick to ask for the next activity that needs to be done, then the next activity, you will receive an intuitive answer to what needs to be done next, and at the same time, the next activity, you will have a sense of conviction that yes, this is exactly what needs to be done. And there will be no doubts, second guessing, or worrying about the following activity. So any comments or anything you want to add about spontaneity? Because this is a very important subject, right? But I know we have dealt with it. Everyone here in the room has dealt with this at some point, right? Yes, Roy.
Well, at the spiritual center where I work, when I give lectures or classes, I tend not to stick to, I outline very much. I go off on tangents that just seem to be more interesting than what was pre-planned.
Right.
So I think that's spontaneity.
It is.
I don't doubt it. I'm just going where the energy is.
It is, yes.
And also I tend to wander around and joke around with people a lot there, and that's all very in the moment.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about should I say this, should I not say that. It's just
Right.
having fun.
Right. Yes, and the outline can be created, the outline for a class can be created from a center of intuition. First of all, you kind of make silence in the mind and the thoughts begin to flow and you write them down so that you know already that the outline has been created from a spontaneous center or from consciousness, and then now you are you're using the outline, but the outline will only tell you, okay, now you need to talk about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what are you going to say about that comes spontaneously,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So and you may go in tangent or even betray the outline at some point and do something else, and that's fine, right? Because you're following intuition.
I also like to throw questions out and engage people with dialogue, and that can lead the discussion or the lecture in any number of directions.
Right.
So that takes precedence over the outline.
Over the outline. Yes. yeah, teaching is also ideally a spontaneous action, right? Now, interestingly, the Indians, the yogis, they have talked a lot, or they talk a lot about in their scriptures about what is called right action. And the word right action, has a morality tone that is not necessarily the best. So a much better approach to this is spontaneous action. And the ones that have worked with the idea of spontaneity are actually not so much the yogis, I would say, but the Zen teachers. In Zen, spontaneity is very important. And in fact, one of the problems with yoga at this time, I think it will change, but is too much discipline that ruins spontaneity, right? Giving too much preference to discipline. It's not that discipline doesn't have a place, right? But if it's excessive, then it can interfere. And of course, there are different teachers. Each teacher in yoga is different. But at least that was my experience in my contact with yoga for many years.
What
Yes.
about, instead of saying right action, if you said effective action?
Okay, so what about, instead of saying right action, saying effective action? Well, again, the word effective reminds me of engineering, right? Right, still left brain, but spontaneous action can be extremely effective, like the most effective of all, right? And still, these are pointers, these are pointers. If the word effective works for you, it's just use it, Spontaneous action is a pointer to something, right? It's a pointer to spontaneous action, right? And creating the intention of functioning from a spontaneity, from a spontaneous action, is very valuable, as I said. And but at that moment, when you state your intention, you're using a pointer. The pointer is spontaneous action, right?
But how about the word appropriate action?
Again, it has a tone of morality and effort, but spontaneous action can be actually extremely appropriate, more than any other action.
I've met people who are emotionally reactive, and they may think that they're being spontaneous in their reactivity.
That's a very good question.
So is that
It's very
spontaneity,
misunderstood,
or,
right?
people reacting all sorts of
Yes,
things?
reacting. See, the word reacting. So, Roy's question is that sometimes spontaneity is understood as reactivity and emotional discharge, right?
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with true spontaneity. Spontaneous action comes from consciousness. Consciousness is anything but reactive. It's completely acceptative of the moment as it is. Reactivity is the opposite. It's non-acceptance, right? So this is a misunderstanding in some teachings or individuals that their ego finds comfortable to think that they are spontaneous because they are reacting. It's like feeling good with myself, although I'm doing stupid things. Right?
Well, it seems like
But I'm not saying that every action that springs from emotion should be, or any reaction may not be spontaneous. There could be some spontaneous reactions that come from emotion that are really an expression of consciousness, right? But it's not something that common, I would say. Consciousness is very peaceful, right? And it's not reactive. But some teachers, occasionally, they felt the need to do an action that involved one of their students that seemed to be reactive, but actually was internally guided. Like, for example, I remember a story of a teacher that she was in France visiting, giving some talks, and she was surrounded by students. And one of these students came forward and told her story, something that was going on with him, very painful for him. And what she did was totally strange. She slapped him in the face, right? And he was shocked. But in the shock, he was healed. It was so shocking that whatever was bothering him energetically was out. Yeah. So she did something that seemed reactive, right? But it was for a higher purpose. And this particular intervention, the intervention of slapping the student or the patient, it's an old tradition in certain spiritual groups, and they do it, but it has to be done by a real a teacher that is extremely intuitive to do that and do no harm, right? Today it would be considered very inappropriate, and we don't see any teacher doing that. But I remember reading at some point that centuries ago this was a much more common practice. Yeah, slapping the student, right? To help them, not to hurt them. I have never seen it. I have never seen it in my life, but if you find the information, if you look for the information, you will find it.
We have lawsuits now.
We have what? We have lawsuits now, of course.
It seems like when people are emotionally reacting, that they're actually overreacting. So it's not appropriate for the moment.
Right.
And oftentimes they're reacting not to what's going on, but to something inside themselves. That's a
Yes, of course.
Condition.
Always reactivity is about something that is going on inside. It's been triggered by what is happening outside, but it's something unresolved in the mind-body organism.
It seems when something is coming truly spontaneously that it's more playful rather than reactive.
Yeah, spontaneity has a playful element, right? No doubt about it. Not always, but it does. It has it, right? Yeah. Yeah. Perhaps the beauty of playing is that it puts us in a spontaneous mood, right? Unless we are too intent on winning.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're too intent, your intention is to win, then you get out of the enjoyment of playing just for playing.
Yeah, that's a different definition of playing. It's not spontaneous playing. It's really competing.
Right, competing. Right.
So, how do you word it? Say before you start the day in the morning. How do you phrase it?
How you phrase it in your own mind? You can phrase it as You can use an I statement there. I want to function from a spontaneous center, or you can use it. You can use the passive voice and say the actions today are flowing from spontaneity. But an intention, interestingly, an intention many times is so fast that is prior to thought, right? The intention arises to function from spontaneity and doesn't need to be turned into thoughts, into a thought. It's just the intention. We could say that intention is prior to thought. Consciousness in the cosmology of the universe, we could say first there was pure consciousness, devoid of form and devoid of thought, in a state of resting. And then the first movement was intention, and the second movement was thought, and the third movement was energy, and the fourth one was matter. So intention may arise, the intention of functioning from a spontaneous center may arise and may not need a thought form. Or may be expressed with something as simple as the word spontaneity. May happen in the mind, spontaneity, spontaneous action, which is a pointer, right? Spontaneous action is a pointer. Spontaneous action all day, that's a definite intention and accompanied by determination. Yes.
Is intention similar to an impulse?
Its intention what?
Similar to an impulse.
If its intention is similar to impulse, I would say that no, because the impulse seems to be something more coming from the body, right? The impulse to eat, or the impulse is more similar to reactivity also. An impulse can be aligned with consciousness, right? Or may not. We have impulses that are okay, but we have impulses that need to be restrained. And that seems to be contrary to spontaneity, but it isn't. If you have the impulse to do something that will harm somebody and you restrain it, right? The restraining it may be the spontaneous answer from consciousness and finding another way to resolve the problem. So your question ties up with Roy's question a moment ago, right? Which is reacting has been considered spontaneous, and following impulses has been considered spontaneous action. But actually, I don't think so. I think that spontaneous action is the action that comes from no mind, from pure intuition, from consciousness. And it's a path, because once every action of the day is coming from that spontaneous center, then to begin with you begin to realize that you're not the doer, that the doer that is guiding every action and is doing every action is consciousness itself, right? And so spontaneity leads into the realization that you're not the doer, that consciousness is doing through you, through the mind-body system. Yes.
Would you say that to be driven is the opposite of spontaneity? To feel driven?
That to be driven is the opposite of spontaneity? No, I would say that you can be very driven and spontaneous. If the drive is coming from that level, from the level of consciousness, and it's not an ego drive. The other day I had a very interesting conversation with a client that he wants to pursue a certain project and vocation in life. He's a young man, and he has wanted to do this for many years, but he has not done it, right? So I asked him, is this desire a desire that comes from the ego, or it comes from a deeper level? And he immediately said, I have to be honest, it comes 100% from the ego. Right? So a drive, he could have answered one or the other way. The same drive could be, I didn't know the answer. I just asked him, and he was honest and intuitive enough to find that it was totally ego driven, that the drive was generated by the ego. But the answer could have been the opposite. It could have been, yes, this is coming from a very deep level in me, right? This is something that is like Sandy the other day. I asked her, what is interest in music, when did it begin? And she said, when I was a child. It was there at a very early age. So it's a vocation is something that usually comes from a very deep level. And it's a drive. So there are drives that can be very intense, and they can move you with great determination and energy, but still they are coming from consciousness. Any other question?
Just curious how you explained it. You said at the beginning there was pure consciousness, And then from there came the intention. Am I right?
Yes, the intention to create
The intention to create.
a universe, right?
And then after that, what was next?
Thoughts,
Thoughts.
right? The world of thoughts and images,
And then from there, material.
energy,
Energy.
right? The world of vibration or astral. This is an interesting thing about the singing bowls. The singing bowls put you in contact with the astral energy because they can resonate. The sound can resonate with the astral body and the chakras, right? That's why there are 7 bowls, one for each chakra, and you can use that to tune the sound, to hear the sound, and give attention or awareness to the energy in a particular center on the spine. And the interesting thing is that awareness can actually be aware of the energy in the center, right? Not the physical, but it's the subtle astral energy. Awareness can be aware of the subtle astral energy in a particular center on the spine. And as Sandy was playing, I could see that sometimes there was like an intuitive movement towards becoming aware of a particular center in the spine, a particular area in the spine. Personally, I think that the one that was more significant was here, to center the attention, awareness in this center. But where I want to go is that in this center, you can put the attention in 3 levels. You can put it in the physical, the sensation here. You can put it in the energy itself, the subtle energy. Awareness becomes aware or kind of one with the subtle energy that is here. Then it can become aware of awareness itself. So you can be here, and just by intention, awareness becomes aware of itself here, right? So this type of work seems to be very appropriate for working on the chakras in the energy level, in the spine and the astral body. You can eventually also be aware with the sounds of the whole astral body. Eckhart Tolle calls it the inner body. Right? So you're kind of aware of the whole inner body and is in contact with the vibration of the. This is facilitated by the vibration of the singing bowls. But again, as the astral energy is not limited to the physical body. So there is astral energy everywhere, right? So we could say that we can bring awareness to the astral energy that is surrounding us, all around, in the body, outside the body. We are resting in that energy, right? Like resting as awareness, but resting in the light, in the energy light. I think in the Indian scriptures they call the light, the Divine Mother.
Or the Shakti.
Shakti, right. Shakti, or the Divine Mother. Mm-hmm. So you can give attention to the Divine Mother or to the Father. The Father is consciousness, and the Divine Mother is energy. And awareness can go one way or the other.
Which one is the light?
The Divine Mother is the light,
Mother.
right? The light, the energy, is the mother in yoga. So Advaita actually works not so much with the light, right? It works directly with consciousness. So I had a lot of training in the light, right, because of yoga. And then I went to a retreat with an Advaita teacher, and the Advaita teacher was talking about meditation and different things, and finally he said, this work has nothing to do with energy. It's not about energy. And I was really surprised in the beginning. So here nothing that we have talked about has anything to do with energy. So it's all about consciousness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awareness becoming aware of itself, consciousness becoming aware of consciousness, consciousness resting as consciousness, awareness resting as awareness.
You can be conscious of your own consciousness.
Right. Consciousness can be consciousness of itself. You can remove the you. Right? The you is a story. So awareness can be aware of the energy, of the light. It's not you that you are becoming aware of the light. That is the story of the ego. I am at the center of the experience. But it's not true. The experience, at the center of experience, there is awareness. Undifferentiated.
So, you were saying you had training in the light first.
Right.
And
Same as you, right?
yeah.
Right.
I mean, it started in my 20s.
Right.
So you said you encountered the teacher, the non-duality teacher, and he
Yes.
says this has nothing to do
With energy.
with energy.
Right. It was shocking for me,
Yeah.
but I recognized the truth. In fact, in Advaita, for what I have seen later, what I saw later is that some teachers have kind of contempt about working with the energy or emphasizing the energy aspect, because, and the reason is that the astral world and the energy, it's somewhat phenomenal still, right? It's very subtle, but it still is part of the phenomena. And Advaita is concerned with the noumenal,
Not the phenomenon.
not the phenomena. So awareness is the noumenal. But still, there are many proponents that will tell you, no, there is value to work with the light and to awaken the Kundalini and to open the chakras and so on. So there are different opinions in this. And who is going to eventually make the decision? You. Right?
But they both have value.
Yes, most likely. You will feel guided to one or the other or both, one at a certain point in your development and another one at a different point in your development. You will feel guided, and that guidance is spontaneous, because if you if you transform the teachings into rules, and I say here, well, this is higher, so don't waste your time with energy. Go for consciousness, right? Well, I'm giving you a recipe again. I give you mind stuff, and it may not be the fastest route for you because it's unique for you. So you need to find what really works for you. But I would definitely experiment with both, right? So that you begin to get a sense of when you are working with consciousness itself and when you are working with energy, and how both feel, right? And not lock yourself into one. I think that was the problem in the original teachings that I had in yoga. It was they were locking you into working with the light only, and there was no attention to attention, no attention to awareness. So it didn't give you options, right? Okay, do we stop here and have something to eat? Right. Thank you, Sandy, very much for the presentation, and thank you guys for coming.